All right, so welcome to this session on the workflow course in second year. Today we're going to be going through some of the module content and some of the lessons and looking at common issues and how to get around those. And also we will be looking at the course assignment requirements, going through those in a bit more detail and talking about testing, and we can do some questions as well, just sort of general Q&A. All right, so the introductory lessons, I think the main challenge here is getting used to working in the command line. For those of us who have been developers for a while, it's a very, very familiar place to be. And it's sort of, I think when you're starting out, the command line seems like the hostile place to go, the scary place to go. And the UI version of the same tool seems like the safe place to go. After a while, after sort of 3 or 4 years of using CLI, you will probably start to change your mind on that, and it may even reverse. So for many of us, if we want to get something done, the most reliable and the safest and the quickest and most efficient way to do that is on the command line. And if you are doing a very important tool and you're using a UI, you're essentially opening yourself up to two different layers of failure. The tool itself could fail, and the UI could fail as well. And it's not always very clear which one is happening. So with the command line, when you see an error on the command line, that is as close to the truth that the computer can give you. Any closer to the truth, and it's not going to be in English, it's going to be a random string of numbers. So the reason we use the CLI is to get really, really close to the computer to make sure that the actions we're performing are happening exactly as we want them to. And there's also an added benefit, which is that for tutorials like this, you can see that I've written out all of these commands, and as you're going along, you're following these commands. These commands can be compiled into a sort of script, which is called a shell script. And if you have a process that you run repeatedly, like for example, you might have a 12-step process on the command line to set up a new API or something like that. If you have these 12 steps, you can sort of group them together into one file, and when you need to do that task, you can just run that one file and the tasks will happen one by one, and they should happen in the exact same way every time you run them as well, so that command line tasks are very reliable. So this is why we use it. It's not just to sort of make ourselves look like hackers. And most of the time, like if I'm using the command line and I'm not familiar with the tool, I don't necessarily know how it's going to work. I don't know what the commands are. I don't know what I'm supposed to be typing. So I will show you that there are a few little tricks if you're sort of dealing with something and you're not sure about what you're dealing with. So for example, if someone had just told me to use Git and I didn't really know what Git was, the first thing I might do is just type the command. And here it's giving us a manual on how to use Git. This is actually the same as the information you get from the Git website. And it says here as well that there's Git help A and Git help G. So we could try Git help G, Git help A. And these are just going to give us useful information. In this case, it's a bit too much information. We don't really need to understand Git in this detail. And to quit that command, I'm using :Q. If anyone's wondering about where :Q comes from, I believe this is a Vim style command. I'm not a big fan of it myself, but there's a few common ways to quit something. It's either going to be Control-C or it's going to be :Q. So what I have done before the session is I've set up a blank repo somewhere. One second, if I can find it. Maybe I didn't set it up. Here we go. So I have a blank repo called workflow, and I just have an empty, almost empty README file. And I think the best way to proceed with the session is going to be proceeding with these instead of going through these lessons specifically. Like these are designed to show you these concepts on their own, and then later on we start to tie these concepts together. So if my intention here is to set up stuff like ESLint and Prettier, I might want an existing project. So I think I'm just going to create some example files. So we'll have index and we'll have a couple of script files. Okay. So I've created these three files, and I'm going to, before I commit anything, I'm going to create a branch, and I'm going to represent my this would be like my JS2 branch or my other project branch. So I'm just going to call this app with 3 P's. That wasn't really intentional. Create a new branch, app with 2 P's. There we go. So let's do. We'll need to request something. We'll need to render something, and then I'll return app ready. So we may as well use the social media API because that's fresh in my head. So I'm just going to make a one-page application here that we can test. Or in fact, we can use one of these. We can use the books endpoint or something. Let's use Catfax. So I'm going to set up the host domain, and we need a JWT key, which I'm just going to grab with Postman because I'm don't really feel like writing an auth flow right now. So I hope that I've got a valid key. This looks like I do have a valid key, so I'm just going to grab that one. Okay. Yep. Oh, that's great. Okay. Makes life a lot easier. Okay, so we've got our facts, and for each fact, I'm going to create a little template. So I'm going to say document.body and use my favorite. Actually, no, let's do it. Let's do it with create element just to be. So I think fact.text was the right thing there. And then I'm going to append each item to the DOM and make sure my app is being called, and then we'll run that. Trying to keep it very simple for now, but we can, as we get to testing, we can add more functionalities to test. So I'm going to add that as a script. and I'm going to defer, and we should be able to see the simple application. Hopefully that works. Oh, right. I forgot to say type module, which I don't really need, but I'm going to keep it anyway. Okay, so there's our cat facts. Maybe we can add just a basic bit of CSS. Need to connect that. No border. Oh, I didn't. There we go. All right, cool. So we have our application. It's very exciting. And this is what we will be using just as our basis to test with. So this would all be pre-written beforehand. And I'm just going to say create cat app. And I'll publish that. And now so none of this is required for the CA. This is just so I've got a bit of context to work with. Otherwise, I'm just going to be creating kind of tests out of thin air. So now let's say that this is someone else's cat app. This is another developer has asked me to work on their app in order to improve their workflow. That's the sort of context of this task. So I would create a new branch called workflow and publish that so that it's just the same as the other branch for now. And from here, I might say workflow like Prettier, and then go through the process of setting up Prettier, which I believe is this lesson here. Actually, no, we don't have npm set up, so let's do that. Okay, so this could be fine, by the way. Like just it might be that the package that you are working on doesn't actually have a package JSON file to start off with, and this is one of the improvements that you might be adding to it. It could be that if there's no dependencies up until this point, it didn't actually need a package JSON file. So I'm going to assume that the project I'm working on does not have one, but it is quite likely that the project you're working on will already have one. So I'm just going to do the shortcut to initialize that. And I'm actually going to change my branch name to workflow npm setup, because that's more accurately what I'm doing right now. And I'm going to just give that a quick edit. I'm going to say cat facts, and we'll put it to 0.01 because the assumption is that we're working on a finished product, and we're going to be taking it above 0.01 here. And for now, the test script can stay as it is. Everything else can stay as it is. And I'm just going to say adds package.json and publish that branch. Okay, so I've skipped past all of this stuff. I need to change the type of the repository. So I can come under here maybe and say type is module. And then we have got this process. So I'm not going to go through the process of installing these dependencies, because these are just meant to be like kind of a throwaway dependency that you use to get the idea of upgrading and downgrading. I'm more interested in going straight to Prettier, because this is what's going to actually be useful to this project that I have here. So I'm going to install Prettier. Oh, and now I need to I need to commit that, so changes type to module. And I should be doing all these commits in the command line now. Now I think about it. So let's do that. Let's switch to doing that because this is a good habit to be in. So I have one change. If I say git status, I can see that I've got one change, and I'm going to git add that one file, package.json. Maybe make this a bit bigger. And now we can see that there's one staged file, and I can git commit. So we've added that file. We can now commit the file. The most important thing when committing a file is adding a message, and this message is going to be changes type to module because that's what we did. And I can git push to make sure those changes are sent to the server. So everything I can do in this sidebar here with the UI, I can do with the CLI by writing the right commands. And I'm going to stick to the CLI from now on. Okay, so we are done with npm setup. So I'm going to go back to workflow, and we could do a pull request at this point, or since I'm the only person working on this, I don't really need to show anyone. Like a pull request, the idea is that you're creating visibility around your changes. And at this point in time, I don't really need that visibility because no one else is going to be checking what I'm doing at this point. So instead of opening a pull request and going through that full process, I'm just going to git merge, and I'm going to git merge my workflow npm setup branch. And we can see that that worked, and one file changed, and we now have all of the stuff we had in our other branch in our workflow branch. And I can git push to send that up to the server. And now I'm going to change. So now is the time I wanted to be doing the prettier stuff. So I've checked out prettier. I'll just do that again in the command line. So check out workflow prettier. And now this is behind. So you can see the package.json file has disappeared. That's because the history of this branch is behind the other branches because we created it before and we haven't merged any of those changes in. So the quickest way to fix that is going to be to merge in workflow. And there we are. So now workflow npm setup, and workflow prettier, they're all identical. And if I do a git log graph one line, you can see here head, most recent commit. The head contains, or the pointer shows that workflow prettier, origin workflow npm setup workflow, and workflow npm setup. These are all the branches that are currently identical because they have all been merged into each other. So if you're working and you create a branch on a Tuesday to do something, and then you don't want to do that anymore, and on a Wednesday you switch to another branch, and then you make loads of good changes and you merge that into your working branch, you might be in this situation where the branch you created on the Tuesday is now stale or out of date, and the quickest way to resolve that is to merge whichever branch contains the changes you want. So I am now ready to continue because I'm up to date in history, and I'm going to be doing this command here, npm install save dev prettier. So I can write it like this, or I can write it like this, npm I -D prettier. And that's the same thing, it's just a shorthand. So one is a shorthand for the other. And we can see, oh, we've missed a very important task. So what I'm going to do is I forgot to create a git ignore file. So you can see there's 38 changes, but most of these changes are node modules, which we don't want. So I'm going to create a git ignore file, and we can do that in lots of different ways. We can just create a new file in VS Code, but this being a command line interface based lesson, I'm going to use the command line interface to do this. So there's a tool called cat which can be used to write files. Oops, I did that is not the correct name of the file. Let's try that again. So cat and then a forward bracket, and then .gitignore is the name of the file I want to create, and then I'm going to type node modules and press Control D to save. And that should have created me a little node modules file. That is a very quick way to write a simple text file. And as I was saying earlier about the idea of grouping your common scripts together, this cat script might be one that you put into a sort of standard procedure to make sure that you have that gitignore file. So we've got that file now, and we can see that the number of changes has gone from 38 to 3, which is a bit more in line with what we were expecting. So I'm going to add this one first and say adds gitignore. Oh, I'm using the command line. I need to almost get rid of this sidebar so I don't have the temptation to do that. Okay, so git status. We've got these two files, so I'm going to add just gitignore first, because these two changes are a little unrelated, and git commit, and I'm going to say adds gitignore, and then I'm going to do the same thing, git add, except this is going to be for the remaining two files. And I could type out both files separately, but I am feeling a little bit lazy, and I know I only have two files, so I'm going to do git add dot, which will add both, or it will actually add all of the files to the staging area. So that saves me a little bit of typing, and then I can commit with a message again, and I'm going to say installs prettier. Okay, and a git push so that our are we doing main, or oh no, wait, we're not in the right we're not in the right branch. We haven't published this branch yet. So let's do this. Okay, now we are up to date with the server. All of our changes are on the server, and we have Prettier installed. So the next thing in the lesson is, well, there's a few testing commands. So I'm not going to do these because this is to give you the idea of how Prettier is going to be working. I'm more interested in this section here, specifically this script here, which is going to run Prettier, except in our case, it's not going to be like, we're not going to be running it on the Joker file because we don't have a Joker file. So this doesn't really make sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, actually, anything, I want to say anything inside this folder. So I'm going to do **, and then, so that's any folder, and then any file that ends with JS. So that's what I want to target. So if I add more files to this, it should format all of them. So we can test that out. I will split the screen so we can see. Let's just get rid of these. Do we need to split the screen? Not really. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of mess up the formatting a little bit to give Prettier something for us to see. Let's see, let's do inconsistent quote marks, and what else can we do that will be fun? I don't actually know if it will complain about this or not. but we can try. Okay, so I've messed up this file pretty good, and hopefully if we run npm run format, there we go. So, oh, I actually spelled document wrong there. So Prettier is working, and if I want to test that it's working on all files, I can say something in here, ABC, and then like do that or something, and there we go. So at that point, I'm happy that Prettier is working. It's quite a straightforward setup. Like we don't really have that many steps. And you'll notice that even though I've been testing on the existing code, I'm not going to keep these changes. So I'm going to discard these changes. The reason is that I'm only creating the infrastructure. So I'm not trying to change the code of the person's project I'm working on. I'm trying to provide them with tools so that when they write new code, it will be automatically formatted and they have the choice to format their own code themselves. This is just one of the slight differences between working on your project and someone else's project. We can see here that our changes are ready, so I'm going to git add package.json and commit that as adds formatting script. I actually I made a mistake there. I don't know if anyone of you can see that, but I just made a spelling mistake, which is perhaps not the biggest problem in the world, but I do actually have a section on how to fix that. So I think it's in this lesson. Oh no, actually I think it's in lesson 2, correcting mistakes. Here we go. So lesson 2, correcting mistakes. I do this on purpose, so I have a spelling mistake in the commit message, and I also have a spelling error in the change itself. And you can see here by using the amend flag, this can be resolved. So I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to say git commit amend m and adds formatting script spelt correctly. And there we go. We're good to go. We can push. And if we just quickly check in with our GitHub project, which I think is called workflow, hopefully. So we can see we've got a lot of branches going on. GitHub wants us to be opening pull requests, and I'm just going to go and check up on this branch here. And we should be able to see that we've got our format task, so that's all good. All right, no questions so far, cool. All right, so the next thing is going to be, so we're going back to this one. The next thing to install is ESLint. So let's see, where is ESLint here? Maybe it is not. Okay, here we go. So we can talk about versions because maybe this is, okay, so this is a good time to talk about versions. All right, so at the moment we've got Catfax 1.0, and so far we've made one fairly small change, but it's still worth sort of keeping track of. So at this point, I might say that the addition of Prettier is worth a patch. So I'm going to say npm version patch. And what that's going to do is update the version number to 1.0.1. and that point 1 represents the work I've just done. Really, I should be doing this. I should be doing this when I make pull requests. So this isn't quite the sort of proper professional flow, but I'm going to be updating the version as I go along, just to give you an idea of what sort of changes might represent a version change. So we are done with Prettier. So I'm going to check out the workflow branch, and I'm going to merge the workflow Prettier branch in. Not something we can merge. Why not? Maybe I got the name of the branch wrong. So, I mean, if I can do it in here, then I should be able to do it in the command line. Git pull. Okay, there we go. So I think I just had to update. I had to pull the branch just to make sure that it was up to date before I could merge the two branches. So that was what was going on there. And now the workflow branch is up to date. So the next thing to do would be to create a new branch called workflow ESLint. Let's call that, and we're going to git checkout workflow ESLint. Okay, and we're going to be going through the same process, very similar process, which is installing the package and setting up a task. So ESLint is actually way more useful than Prettier. Prettier is nice because it kind of rules out the main reason we use Prettier is not because we like to look at nicely formatted code. The main reason we use Prettier is so that there is an agreed upon way to format that code, so that when someone makes a change and they create some white space or they like tab something the wrong way, that doesn't get represented in the pull request diagram, like the change diagram, because if you've got loads of code changes and you've also got lots of like white space changes and stuff like that, it just creates a lot of unnecessary stuff that you have to filter through in order to see the important part. So the main reason we use tools like Prettier is consistency. That's like number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the reasons to use Prettier. Number 6 is formatted code looks better, but it's not just an aesthetic thing. And likewise, ESLint is here to provide a similar sort of utility, but it's working on the code level. So it's less concerned about how your code looks, and it's more concerned about the syntax that you're using, and it will provide some error checking. So it will create more errors as far as you're concerned. In VS Code, you will see more errors, but those errors are actually assistance. So when working with ESLint, you're going to be getting more assistance from VS Code, and the way that assistance is going to manifest itself is going to be more red underlines. So a lot of people get turned off when they start using this, but it's really something that's there to help you and help you make good choices when you're coding. So I'm installing that in the same way with save dev flag. I could use the capital I flag, like I could do npm id ESLint, and then that would be the same thing. And we can see in the dev dependencies that that has been updated. This is a very important step. So ESLint on its own, if you don't do this step, ESLint is going to make a bunch of assumptions about how you're writing JavaScript, and I can almost guarantee that those assumptions are not going to be correct. So it's best to run this init stage so that you can have a little interview with ESLint and you can tell ESLint what you would like it to use it for. So in this case, I'm happy with that default choice. The options are to check syntax only, to check syntax and to find problems, or to check syntax, find problems, and enforce code style. But we have Prettier to enforce code style, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to hit enter. And just in case this is not obvious, the enter key is typically used to like make a selection, and the space key is typically used to like select something. So in this menu, I'm just using up and down arrows and enter, but sometimes you may need to use space to sort of, if you have like a multiple choice, space is often the key that you use to mark your choices. So the next question is, what type of modules does your project use? And we are using regular JavaScript modules, import, export. So I'm just going to go with that default as well. And it says, which framework are you using? We're not using any framework at this point, so we're going to say none. We're also not using TypeScript. And finally, where does your code run? Well, our code is not really going to run in Node, I wouldn't say, and that's unticked by default. So you can see pressing spacebar is what ticks or unticks that. So again, I'm happy with the default option, which is just to run on the browser. And here, what format do you want your config files to be in? All of the tutorials are using JSON for config files, so I recommend that you do the same thing. If you're feeling really brave, you can use YAML. That might be quite good practice for using YAML, but it's very common to use JSON. I like using JSON, so we're going to use JSON. And you can see we've got our new file, and it's got a fairly sparse set of configurations here. It's basically just telling us that our environment is a browser, that it's using modern JavaScript, and that, or it's allowing for modern JavaScript syntax is what I should say. And then in terms of the rules, these rules are all contained here. So we can go and investigate what these rules are, and we can also add our own. If we want to turn off a specific rule or turn on a specific rule, we can do that here. So I'll show an example of that in just a second. All right. So I'm not sure if I actually added any custom rules here, but you can find them just by searching for ESLint rules. And it's unlikely that you're going to be customizing this too much, but I do just want to show you that not everyone uses the same rules. Some projects, so like React is going to require some rules to be turned on. It's going to require some rules to be turned off. So one of them would be like this one, I think is, yeah. So this rule says that if you're making a switch statement, you have to have, I think, a default. Is that what it's saying? Yeah. So this one is, in fact, I can demonstrate this. So let's go to our index file. So I'm just adapting this this example a little bit. Okay, so this has a fall through, which is if this, well, let's say value, right? And then this is a little structure, a little logical structure, and it's saying if the value is 1, console log A, and if the value is 2, console log B. And what this particular rule is talking about is that if I turn this rule on, no fall through, I don't know if it's ESLint no fall through. Does that seem... It says that it is actually a part of the default. So I'll leave it at there, and we'll run the lint command and see if it picks it up. So those are rules. I'll show you a rule in a second in action, but we need to actually add the script first, which is the npm script here. And if you compare the format task or the format script, it's pretty similar. We're saying ESLint, and then we're telling it to run on the same sort of thing. So we could even add JS in there to make it more specific. And now we can run npm run lint, and it seems fine. So maybe this is not how you trigger the fall through. I want to invoke ESLint, but I'm not actually. Okay, so this is closer to the example that is given in the lesson, where you have a function and one of these arguments or these parameters is not being used, and you can see that reject is declared, but it's never used. So you can see that that comes from ESLint, and the rule is no unused vars. So if we click on this, it'll take us straight to the documentation for that rule. So instead of just stopping when you see an error like this, it is a good idea to actually follow the chain and go and have a look at what the official documentation says about this. So this is just telling us that it's bad form to have a variable that we're not using. So it would like us to delete that variable. But I just want to show you how we would override that if we decided that we actually wanted, if we needed this to be this way for whatever reason. So quick fix will say it'll prefer the option of removing the variable. That's what it will try and do automatically. It also has an option to prefix the variable or the parameter, and that sort of suggests that you might use it in the future or that it's important. And then there's the options to disable this rule for this line, disable the rule for the entire file, which looks like that. But we don't want to do that because that ends up being very messy. It's better to have all of these things stored in one place. So in this case, we would say no unused vars, and the options are error, off, or warn. It might be quite a good idea to use warn, so that now it's giving us a warning rather than an error. And if we were to turn this off, then it's not even going to notify us at all. So that's a bad idea, because generally speaking, these rules are turned on for a reason. But just as an example, maybe something is kind of bugging you and you can't you can't find a way to change your code to get around it. It's not the best thing in the world, but there are ways to customize these rules. Not everyone has to live with the recommended rule set. But I am used to doing that, so I am, and I'm going to solve the problem by doing that. Or actually, no, I'm not. I'll do it with ESLint fix. So in the lesson, so it tells me if I run lint, it tells me where this error is. I can click this link. So if I go somewhere else in my application and I run this, I can click on this link and it will take me to the file where the error is. It also tells me that the error is on line 2, and I can see very clearly it's on line 2. So these error messages are very, very helpful. It'll tell you what's wrong, where it's wrong, and maybe even give you a solution to fix it. And if we, so yeah, some of these errors can be fixed automatically, and that is using the fix argument there in ESLint. So what I have done here is that I've created a second linting command. One of them is just to provide information, and the other one is going to attempt to fix the problems automatically. I can't remember if this is something that can be fixed automatically, so we'll just have to find out by running npm lint fix. And it doesn't look like it is. So there are times when ESLint can't automatically fix your work because it's not sort of it's not necessarily like confident about what the right choice would be. So maybe I can show an example of something that can be automatically fixed. This will never run. Okay, so in this case, my code is unreachable. It's unreachable because I've written it after the return statement. So the return statement ends the execution for this function. And since the execution has been ended, nothing can happen afterwards. So I'm hoping that that is a fixable error. Doesn't seem like it is either. Let me just Google lint fixable. I'm not sure if anyone's ever gone out looking for things they can do wrong on purpose for the benefit of fixing them with ESLint. So I didn't come prepared with that list, I'm afraid. There are some issues. There are some syntax errors that ESLint can take care of automatically, but basically it's going to be pointing you towards the issue and giving you an idea of how to resolve that yourself. I think that is it for ESLint, but there is a little bit of extra stuff when we get to testing. So before I commit stuff, I'm going to add ESLint cache to the ignore file because I don't really want that knocking around. And then I need to run get status to see what files I've added or modified. And I'm going to add, so I'm going to get rid of this change because that was just an example. And the rest of them are all related because they add ESLint scripts, they add ESLint dependencies, they add the ESLint cache to here, and they add the config. So I'm happy to git add all, and then I'm going to commit those together as adds ESLint configuration. We can git push origin upstream. I can't remember this. I can't remember that. There we go. Set upstream origin. There we go. Sometimes it's easier just to remember the heuristic that leads you to the right command rather than remembering the right command. I'm sure other teachers know what I mean there. There's some things that just don't seem to stick in the head, and it happens to all of us. Okay, so now we've got that branch up on GitHub as well. We can check that by going in here and checking out ESLint. And I think it's been an hour, so I think I'm going to do a break soon before we move on to like the second half with we're doing some actions, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip straight to testing, and then we will use actions to host the tests. So I'm not going to go through the actions lessons specifically unless someone in the chat asks me to. Instead, I'll go straight to like doing like a practical example on actions because I think it's a little bit easier to understand if you have like a good purpose, and testing work is a good purpose for that kind of thing. All right, so up till now we have done a basic project setup. We've installed Prettier and we've installed ESLint and got those two configured with a sort of base configuration. What I'm going to do next is set up pre-commit hooks. So a hook is a way of running an action or some code at a particular time or at a particular point in a process. I think in the lesson, the example is like riding a bike. Before you get on the bike, you want to put on your helmet, and after you get off the bike, you probably want to take your helmet off again. So we could describe that as there being a pre-bicycle riding hook, where the action is helmet on, and there is a post-bicycle riding hook, which is helmet off. So this concept applies to everything in computer science. Every process has a series of stages, and many processes expose hooks for events to be performed during that process. So for us, the process we're interested in is the commit and push process and the pull request process, i.e. our repository processes. And the hooks that are very useful to us, or the hooks that are most useful to us, are pre-commit and pre-pull request. So pre-commit because we want to only commit good code to our project. So we can run ESLint and we can run Prettier on our code before it gets added to the branch. And then pre-pull request is very important for the same reason, because we don't want bad branches being brought into our main branch. We only want the best code to be committed, and we only want the best code to be merged into our main project. So both of these concepts, they can both be described as guards, like a guard to a building. In this case, ESLint and Prettier are guarding your commits. And that does make development more difficult in the sense that you can't just fire off any commit, any old change just because you feel like it. Now there are rules that you have to satisfy in order to commit your work. So it might seem sort of draconian, or it might seem like a barrier to progress and to development. But having these strong rules in place is a good thing. It's best to heed the rules. They have not been developed for fun or by accident. They are the result of research and lots of experience. So if you are hitting your head against an ESLint rule whilst trying to commit your work, it's worth thinking about why, basically. It's not just a case of making it work. maybe your approach is not going to work, or maybe your approach is unsustainable, and that's sort of the underlying reason that you're getting errors. Um, so you might notice, so going back to pre-commit hooks, there's a very, very, very useful library called MRM, which does a lot of the heavy lifting of this process for you. So we're going to use that. You'll notice that it's npx instead of npm because we don't actually need to add this MRM package to our dependencies. We just need to use it once. So we're just like we did npx ESLint init. This is the same thing. We're just doing it once, and the X here stands for execute. So this is node package execute, and we want to. So we need to change back to our workflow branch. Git checkout workflow, and I can't remember if I merged that or not. So I'm just going to do that again. It looks like I didn't. So now workflow branch is up to date. I'm going to give that a push just in case. And I'll tell a story in a second about what happens if you don't push your code regularly. A real story from quite recently. But for now, I'm going to, oh, sorry, we need to create a new branch. So git branch workflow hooks, and I'm going to run that command. And in the background, this is installing some packages, and it's creating some files and doing a bit of configuration for us. And we can see if we look here, or if we look in our changes tab, we can see that it's installed these two packages, Husky and lint staged. It has also added this prepare script, and it's created a new zone, which is called lint staged. So I'll talk about all of these in a second. It's also created a new git ignore file, which is here inside the Husky folder, and it's created a shell script. So this is what I was talking about earlier when I was saying that it's possible to bundle up scripts together to do something, to do a series of console commands very quickly or in repetition. So that's one of these, basically. So the only thing we need to do is, if you look here, the lint staged area has got, it's only looking for JavaScript files. So we want to add these files as well, because we want to run Prettier on every single one of our files. We don't just want to run it sorry, my brain's not working, on JavaScript files only. We want to also format HTML, we want to format SCSS and even CSS. So I'm just going to copy this whole block and overwrite this block here. And I'm also going to add .css just in case we have CSS in our project, which I think we do not. Yeah, we do actually, cats.css. Okay, so the idea here is that when you stage your files, or when you try and commit them, if they end with JS, these two actions are going to run. If they end with HTML, this action will run. If they end with SCSS or CSS, this action will run. In theory, you could put whatever you want in here, but this is the minimum you need to get it automatically linting files on commit. So we should perhaps test that first. So in order to test it, I'm going to add a unused argument, which we can see is creating a linting error. and I'm just going to attempt to commit bad commit. Okay, so what's happened now is that the lint stage process has begun and it has stopped. And if I click on this open git, actually I want to click on this button, actually, not the highlighted button, show command output. If I click show command output, it's going to tell me what happened. So it found one JS file and it failed to fix, and this is the error that it failed to fix. So this is telling us that it attempted to commit our file. You can see it's still unstaged here, and only when I resolve this error, only when I resolve this error by removing this, or perhaps by using this. So only now can I commit that. And it's gone. You can see it's been added to the project. So that's not the longest process in the world. It's not the scariest process in the world, but these extra lines in your package.json are very powerful and give you a lot of extra support. So I'm going to git add all, and I'm going to commit that, git commit adds pre-commit hooks. All right, and then we can switch back to, in fact, we need to do the upstream push, and then, oh, did I do that directly to the workflow branch? I didn't really mean to do that. Okay, so I accidentally committed to the wrong branch. These things do occasionally happen. That was meant to be in the workflow hooks branch. So I'm just gonna okay, so I do actually have something to commit here because this shell script has been updated. We don't need to, nor should we worry about what is going on here, because this is Husky doing stuff for us. So I'm just going to add that and git commit, and I'll say Husky script updated. It's really not important. What that does at this point, it's managing your hooks for you is what it's doing. Okay, so git checkout workflow, git merge workflow hooks, just to make sure we've got everything. Try and exit Vim if you dare. I'll actually discuss what I just did there. So in my current trend of forgetting things, I forgot to add a message to my commit. Did I? Yeah. So if you just type git commit with no message, you're going to be punished for it because the default text editor for some reason is Vim, which is really hard to use. It's like famously hard to use. I have no idea how to use it personally, so that's not great. You can actually change that setting, so you can change the setting so that VS Code is your default editor, or you can use Nano, which is a bit easier to use. But if you're stuck in Vim and you don't know how to get out, :QA, and if that doesn't work, :QA exclamation mark. And if that doesn't work, you have permission to throw your computer out of the window, because that's how most people quit Vim at that point. All right, git push, because we've got two changes that are not on our server. And we've got pre-commit, we've got Where are my notes? Here we go. So we've done that. So we've just got Jest, Cypress, and some actions work to go through. Um, so the introduction to testing is quite long, as I'm sure you have noticed, and that's because testing requires a different mentality to developing. It's not the same thing. Even though it still uses code, it requires us to think differently. And there are quite a few rules that apply in development that don't apply in testing or vice versa. So this is the intention of this lesson is just to get you into the right mind frame. And these mentalities that I've written about here, like black box thinking, stating the obvious, desiring failure, and repeating yourself, these are really important. Like you actually can't test successfully without doing these things, and these are all things that we're taught not to do whilst we're developing. So that is the main thrust here. I'm going to try and talk about the theory of it as we're actually writing some tests. Okay, I see that. Um, yeah, that is my status indicator you're all seeing. I don't know why that's an option. Okay, well, all I was doing was like kind of this, like going up and down on a page, so you didn't miss too much there. Um, so the difference between unit testing and end-to-end testing, unit testing is all about getting as granular as possible. So if you had a car and you're writing unit tests for your car, you would have a test that checks that the brakes work when you press the pedal. You would have a test that the steering wheel works when you move it. You would have a test that the air conditioning comes on when you press a button. All of these like specific granular little functions that together the car is made up out of. This would be what you're targeting. And you would never have a test which says like, if you turn on the windscreen wiper, the glove box can still be opened, right? Like those two things are completely irrelevant. They've got nothing to do with each other. And so we would never have a unit test where we're sort of stringing or attaching two different components together if we can avoid it, basically. We ideally are just testing a single function at a time. So that is, so I've got the our example code here, the asynchronous app function, which if we actually look at it, I'm going to get rid of the unused argument there. If we look at it, if we were to write JS docs for this, the param is null, and the return is a string. It just gives us a string. So it's kind of a boring function. So I'm going to just split this out a little bit, and I'm going to say get data or get cat. What are we doing? Are we doing jokes or cat facts? Get cat facts. And I'm just going to move this functionality in here. So this is what I'm talking about when I say that it's going to be difficult to test functions that are not pure, as in if they don't have a return and if they don't have an argument. Those are not the easiest functions to test in the world. And based on our refactor here, fact is now going to be awaiting this. So now at least we can test this function, but there's still this stuff which we can't really test because we're not giving any input to this function. So we could just say the app function creates lots of HTML, but we want to go more granular than that. So I'm going to say export function create cat fact HTML, and that's going to require one cat fact as an argument. And I'm going to take this out of the middle, and that is going to be Let's just call that fact to match that. And now we are in the scope of saying for each fact, do this. We can refactor that to this. And then we can pull this and we can create a new function. Create cat facts HTML with an S and facts with an S for plural. And yep, maybe we want to return the item instead of just adding it straight to the document. And so this is now going to be a map because we want to store the results, the fact HTML, I guess is what that's going to be, or the facts HTML. And then we can do the same thing, appending that like so. And that means that our whole function, it looks a lot longer now. There's more lines of code, but it's been split up into functions that each have one responsibility. And these functions with one responsibility are much, much easier to test than a monolith. Not just a monolith, but a monolithic convenience function, i.e. a function that just sort of does a bunch of stuff for us without really taking any arguments. So we should probably check that that actually works. Yep, it looks exactly the same. So that is called in-place refactor, where I'm not trying to change the end result or the outcome of the code. I just want to split the code up so that it's easier to manage, it's easier to debug, and it's easier to test. So I'm just going to pop that in straight to the workflow branch because this is not, I should have really done this at the beginning. So I'm just going to call this refactors app, and then we'll create a new branch. So get branch workflow unit testing, get checkout workflow unit testing. Did I not just do that? Oh, there it is. Oh, I spelt it wrong. Okay. Workflow unit testing. There we go. All right, so we're in the right branch now, and we can start by installing Jest. So generally speaking, these processes are going to start with an installation. I actually need to go back through the previous lessons and add these pins, these version pins. This just makes it easier for us to write these lessons because we know that you're going to be using a particular version of Jest instead of like, you know, maybe Jest releases version 30 soon, and this lesson's not really written for Jest 30. So if you're wondering about why those are there, that is mostly so that you're all on the same page using the same version of the code. And I think for anyone interested in versioning, I should have added a patch version for ESLint, and I should have added a patch version for the lint hooks as well, the pre-commit hooks. So once I'm done installing this, in fact, I can do it on another branch. So I'm quickly gonna, actually no, I shouldn't do that on another branch right now. That'll be a bad idea. Okay, so we're done here. So I'm just gonna quickly I'll do it after, I'll do it, trying to think of a good time. We can add these and say git commit installs jest. Okay, then I'm going to switch back to workflow, and I'm going to nvm version patch. So I'm going to do 1, which is going to represent ESLint changes. I'm going to do 1 which represents the Husky stuff, the pre-commit hooks. So now we're on version 1.3, and I'm going to switch back to what I was doing before, which is git checkout workflow unit testing. Don't want to do that. Yeah, so I just wanted to update that version number by merging the main workflow branch in, and we're good to go. So we're in the right testing branch. We've got our Jest dependency there. And just like with the others, the next thing to do is to set up some scripts in package.json. If you're only using Jest, which is quite common, you can just do this. So you can just say test Jest, like so. That's the smallest amount of configuration needed to get Jest running. So in theory, you could stop the lesson there and not do any of the other config, but the rest of the config is meant to make testing more enjoyable in the sense that you're using the same type of code that you're using in your application. You're not using like outdated syntax. So what I've got here is 2 scripts. We've got test unit, which is Jest, because in the future we're going to add test E to E. So I just need to differentiate between these 2 different types of testing. And for now, the main test command is just going to run our unit test command. So really, this is the same thing as just saying that, except that in future I'm going to add more stuff to this. So this is just like formatted like this so that it can be expanded. And if we were to run test now, it's not really going to happen because we don't have any test files. So that's going to be the next thing to do, is to create an app.test file, app.test.js. And here, so I'm not going to do the ESLint configuration just yet. Let's use this one, the baseline test. Okay, so this is what I want to show before I do ESLint config. Straight off the bat, ESLint is really not happy with this because we're using methods that we haven't imported them anywhere. We never said import test from Jest, which sort of seems like it is maybe how we should do this, but that wasn't what the team at Jest decided, so I'm not going to get too into their decision-making process, but this uses a system called globals. So in the same way that like local storage doesn't give you an error, that's because this is a browser global. It belongs to the window object, and so your browser will automatically make sure that this object exists, which is why you don't have to import local storage from somewhere. In testing land, we have a different set of globals. Our globals are stuff like describe and test and expect and it. And all of these are not recognized by default by either the browser or Node.js, which is where we're actually going to be running our tests. That's the runtime that we're going to be using. So this is the reason that we need to do some extra configuration on ESLint, is just to sort of make ESLint happy with this syntax. And the way we do that is by adding a jest plugin first. And then we're going to add this override block. And this override block is saying, if you find a file that matches this pattern, i.e. it ends with test.js, then activate the I think that should be jest globals, but we will see in a second. So it's basically saying activate all of these like special settings that we have configured, and most of those come from this plugin that we've just downloaded here. So if we come over to ESLint, we can grab the whole overrides block, because they're actually, no, let's just grab this one. And if we go back to our test file, simply by adding that configuration, we're now fine. We don't have a big issue with ESLint rejecting these globals. Now we can run our test again, and we see that we've got one passing test out of one total test. So that just tells us that 1 and 1 does indeed equal 3. It tells us that jest is set up, configured properly. There's nothing else we need to do to get it working. If I was to start writing my test for this now, the first thing I'm probably going to write is import, and I'm going to write, like, what were these called? Get catfacts. And then we would have describe, or even have the name of the function. So describe get catfacts. We open a anonymous function, and I'm just going to start off with, I'm just going to do something really basic. Expect 1 to equal 1, right? I just want to oh, sorry. So describe get catfacts. It can get catfacts. That's kind of what we're hoping for here from the API. And then we have another anonymous function, and we have our expectation. So that's the general kind of layout or flow of a test. I just want to satisfy this. I'm trying to show an example and with an import, and ESLint is complaining about that. So I'm actually going to use it properly. So we're going to say facts equals await get catfacts, expect facts to contain, or I'm trying to think what a good, maybe we are going to test one of the facts. So facts.pop will give us a single fact, and .text will give us the fact itself. Actually, I'm trying to think what a test that actually makes sense here is. Let's do the length. So we've requested some stuff from the API, and I think there's a to have length, just to have length. So to have length is going to test the length of the array, but I don't actually know what the length of the array is right now. So I'm going to say facts.length to be greater than 1. So I'm just hoping that there's more than one fact that we get back in this array. Now, all of this is to show you an error. So all of that setup I just messed around with is so that I can show you just hopefully not working when I press this. So yeah, one test failed out of 1 total, and the error says cannot use an import statement outside of a module. So that's what I'm trying to get at here. This is the normal syntax that we use every day. This is the syntax we want to be writing our tests in. But because the tests are running on Node.js, it wants us to do stuff like const require get cat facts equals, like, it wants us to write these things like that. And we might not have access to all of our other syntax that we're used to. So instead of bending ourselves to the will of how this syntax sort of is by default, we can use Babel to use modern syntax. So that's why we do the next section. So I've got these examples to show you exactly what I've just been through. Cannot use import statement outside a module. And this is the solution here to install 2 packages, Babel core, and Babel's job is to switch between one version of JavaScript and another. It's a reference to the library of Babel in the Bible where everyone can suddenly understand every single language at once. That's the root of the name. Or the Babel fish in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which also has the same origin. We don't really need to worry about what these are too much, just apart from the thing we need to know about them is that they are going to allow us to use modern syntax in this situation. So we've installed those 2. We can see those in our dev dependencies here, those 2. And the next thing to do is to create a Babel config file at the root of the project, babel config.json. And this is a very, very small amount of configuration. And that's all we need. So with that stuff in place, we should be able to run npm test. And I've got an error. Okay, right, fetch. That's a different kettle of fish. Can I not fetch? Can I not use fetch in this context? That seems kind of strange. Right. So the reason it's telling me I can't use fetch is because technically fetch is for the browser, not for Node. I think if I was using the most recent version of Node, that would not be the case. So maybe I can maybe I can try this in Node latest. I won't get that error. Let's try 19 for fun. All right, so let's try that again. Um, okay, so it it failed because I'm doing browser stuff. I think I need just DOM. Um, I'm going to switch tests for now. So I'm going to use this Apple test for a second because I don't really want to get into mocking and stubbing right now. That's sort of a more advanced thing. So we're just going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to use one of these example tests instead. So we'll get rid of that. Okay, so this is a bit better just to show, like this is meant to show the core of testing, where you're almost picking apart something like property by property. So these tests are looking at each different property, and based on the type of that property, they are making an assumption about what the value is going to be, and that's how this test is working. So just to show you that the Babel stuff is working, we've got one failing out of three. And the reason that this is failing, hopefully you've all been through and run this example yourself. The reason that this test fails is because the threshold for a delicious apple is 6 out of 10, and the rating for this particular apple is 4.5, so it's below the threshold. So in this situation, what do we do? Is it our job to change the test to make it pass? Not really. If we have decided that a delicious apple is a 6 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10 maybe, it's not up to us to change our standard of what is and is not a delicious apple just to make sure that this apple is considered delicious. Like, that's not what testing is about. So it's much more likely to be the case that if a well-written test is failing, it's the code that has to change. So if it's crucial that this apple passes this test, then the place to change is in here. We should come in here and maybe give this a 6.5, or pick a different apple. You know, quite frankly, if we had apple A, and we had apple B, and this one was like a 9 out of 10, and apple A was, if apple A was failing the test, well, it fails the test. You know, it's it's not good enough, and it's not about us changing our let's say apple A and apple B. Okay, so now when we run our tests, we should get they pass. Let's make this bigger. So apple A, it is red and juicy, it is vegan friendly, but it is not delicious. Apple B meets all of those criteria. This is obviously an abstract example. If this was a Apple generator, so maybe we have export function generate apple, and we are returning an apple object instead. And maybe there are some arguments here, like place of origin and size and season picked and stuff like that. You know, maybe there's information that is relevant to how this apple is going to be created, and that information is going to have an impact on the end result. So maybe it's that if the place of origin equals France and the size is big and the season picked equals, I don't actually know which season apples are picked. I'm going to assume that they're picked kind of in autumn. So rating, if this is the case, then the rating is going to be 10 out of 10. Otherwise, it's going to be 0 out of 10. Like this is just an example of some app logic. Like this is stupid, obviously, but based on how you change these values, the result is going to change. And so in your test, you would be trying this function out with all of those different options to see if the result is what you're expecting. So short of like actually doing this on a real app, I'm going to leave it there and go on to Cypress testing quick because we just running a little bit low on time. So I'm going to, so we've got these config files, we've got our package JSON file, and then we have these two Apple things, which I'm going to discard. So just to commit, to wrap this branch up, git add all, git commit unit sets up unit testing with jest. Did the same thing where I need to amend my message because I made a mistake. Okay. Now I can go back to workflow and git merge workflow unit testing. And push. And we're going to make a new branch. I'm using checkout B now, which is a shortcut to check out a branch and then switch straight to it. Or sorry, other way around, to create a branch and then switch to that new branch. So this is going to be workflow E to E testing. All right. So end-to-end testing is, personally, I find this more enjoyable than unit testing. I think that it's fair to say that unit testing is more important in the world of software development. Unit testing is critical for stuff like anything that involves money, anything that involves data integrity, anything that involves like handling user information, anything sensitive will have a really dedicated, really comprehensive test coverage is the best way to put it. For a website, there may be a few unit tests you need for your API and for local storage or that sort of thing, but unit testing in back-end development is like incredibly important, and the whole world sort of sits on these unit tests. If we didn't have them, we wouldn't really be able to support the infrastructure that we have in the modern day. End-to-end testing is very different. So instead of testing the granular functions within each code, within each file, we're almost pretending like the website doesn't contain any code at all. Like it's just a magic place that we can come to and we can interact with. We don't know anything about how the site runs, so we shouldn't know, or we shouldn't need to know whether it's a React site or whether it's a pure HTML site or whether it's a WordPress site or whether it's a Vue or a Svelte or an Angular or whatever framework. All we need to know is it's on the internet and we can click stuff. That's the level of context that an end-to-end test has. So the purpose of an end-to-end test is to simulate a user. So if it's a banking application, the unit test is going to be simulating someone logging on. It's going to simulate someone checking their balance, and it's going to simulate someone sending a new transaction. It's going to simulate someone changing their address or ordering a new card. In fact, all of these things. They will do absolutely everything that they can do as a user during the end-to-end test. And since this is happening automatically rather than getting a human being to sit and click through all of these different stages, they can be run repeatedly, they can be run very quickly, and most importantly, they should be stable, i.e., if I run the same test 3 times in a row, I should get the same result 3 times in a row. Whereas if a human is running this test, there might be a slight sort of variation, or they forget to do one step. You've seen in this tutorial, I've forgotten to do stuff plenty of times. So that's just a testament to how unreliable humans are to do repetitive work. So we are effectively scripting a imaginary user in order to carry out every front-facing interaction that we can with a given website, which is a lot of words, but I do promise it's fun. So the same thing we're going to do. So this could be 2 steps here. We could be installing Cypress here and then installing the ESLint plugin for Cypress somewhere else. But I'm going to do these at the same time just to save a little bit of time. We've already done this step, so the lessons are assuming that you're doing them from scratch, that you're not going to be like merging the 2 together. But merging them is not a big problem, because we just have this this override block. And all we do with that override block is we go into our ESLint config and we have our rules for jest there. So I'm just going to stick these below the rules for jest so that we have a matcher for Cypress files and we have a matcher for jest files. And in jest land, that's going to happen. And in Cypress land, this is going to happen. I did have to switch off these rules because the tests that Cypress gives you kind of for free, like the tests that's the example test that Cypress provides, they don't actually pass Cypress's own linting rules, which is a kind of embarrassing for them. Oh, 1 second, please. Sorry, I just had a phone call come through. So yeah, these rules are turned off because if you don't turn off the rules and you use Cypress's own built-in examples, it will complain that the built-in examples don't meet the linting rules. So that is just why those are there. And then this is sort of where the fun part of the process starts, because the next steps in here is to run Cypress open. So if we go to package and go to scripts, we can add this underneath here, and then npm run test e to e. We're going to go end-to-end testing. It automatically adds these configuration files to our project for us. How's it? Sorry, I'm just, sure. Do you want to take the keys? Sorry, I'm just on a phone call. I'm trying to wrap up as soon as I can. All right, so that is an error I'm not familiar with, but I think Um, of course, this is an error I've never seen before. Um, did I install this correctly? Am I going crazy? Loader chain incomplete. I have absolutely no idea what that is. 10.7.0. I do notice that it's telling me to upgrade, but I did test with this version about 2 days ago. So I'm just going to try installing the latest version of Cypress instead. I don't, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, still running on 19. Okay, so I don't really need to do this. NVM use LTS. Okay, NVM use. Still getting the same thing. Um, I wonder if I'm going to try deleting node modules and reinstalling because I might have downloaded some modules that aren't working. Like if I had my target as 19, node 19, that might have been an issue. Nope, this really sucks. I'm going to try a project where I know this is working. So if I go to Noroff, I have like the completed version of this here. Choose. Yeah, so it's working here. Test E to E. Okay, here we go. This is looking a bit better. So you get this window, and I like to use Electron. You can use Chrome if you want, but I like to use Electron just because I don't have any plugins installed. I don't have any extensions installed. I've got no like browser data saved in there. So it's kind of like a fresh browser that's never going to have any config data in there. And what I wanted to show you is not this Google test here, but the scaffolding. So Cypress provides you with a really generous list. And when I say generous, I mean really, really generous list of examples. And between these examples, you can work out how to test just about anything. But what I'm going to do just to wrap this session up, I don't think we have time to go through testing with actions. We can do that on maybe on Monday morning next week. I just want to run some of these suites so that you can see what it actually looks like. in fact, if I, yeah, I want to run a few of them. How do I run a few of them? Um, okay, well, you can click on them one by one, and they like this one is testing. Um, where's the get button? This one's testing that API. Let's go find one that's a bit more interactive. Navigation. So that's checking that various links work. So like, for example, you could run through the header navigation and check that each of the links are not giving you a 404. Um, my Google test was meant to be at least slightly visual, in that you can kind of see that this is like a real process that you might go through yourself. Although I didn't update this one. All right. So this is just what I wanted to show you, this interface. Um, I don't have time to get too deep into the theory of testing in this session, but it is something that's very interesting to me and something I do want to talk about more in another session. Um, so yeah, I think we'll call it for time there, and then we'll pick up again on Monday if that's all right with everyone.